My name is Jack Johnson. I'm chair of the Programs and Education Committee here at the Miami Design Preservation League. You're used to seeing Daniel Serraldo at the beginning of these lectures. Daniel is at City Commission right now, trying to convince them to add the Tatum Waterway to the North Beach Historic District, which we expect them to do today. So I'm doing the introduction for tonight's lecture. So, they have had the opportunity, Joel and his wife, to visit modern buildings in several countries, and this presentation is a result of Joel's interest in both history and design, in particular, the buildings that he and his wife live among in sunny Isles Beach. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joel.
Thank you very much. So when we're looking at this town called Sunny Isles today, I will not assume that everybody knows where it is, so let me just tell you how you would get there if you were here. It's the northernmost part of Miami, and if you went down Collins Avenue, we're at the 10th Street now. If you went to this building, these buildings right here, you would be about 163rd Street, and you would have to pass over one bridge, which I'm going to show you in a minute. So that's kind of just going to, I'm going to show you some maps, but that would give you kind of the big picture. It's roughly speaking about 10 miles north of here. I'm going to mention this. I don't know if you caught the news. The author Tom Wolfe passed away. It was in the news this morning. I just added this slide today. This is a book that he wrote in the early 80s. I reread it about a year ago, and I had a very different reaction to it. He was very denigrating toward the architects. However, I did a little more research because I thought he just didn't like architects. It turns out he didn't like women, he didn't like Jewish people, and he didn't like blacks. So I guess architects were a good company. However, having said that, this book has some interesting insights, and I would still recommend you read it. But you know, you always have to use your own judgment no matter what you do. I just didn't like the way he was sneering at the architects, as if they were foolish. Okay, so Jack mentioned this is a poster that I made of some of my radios. I always like to show this off a little bit. Very little do I still own, except this television over here, that's actually in the back somewhere here today. So very little do I own. Now, one of the interesting things about becoming a tour guide, by the way, is I learned about the radios I no longer have. For example, look at this radio, okay? You know, if you know architecture, you can say, that's Art Deco, 1938 radio. If I were describing this as a building, I would say it's zigzag, okay? It's symmetrical. It's got an A, a B, and an A. On that speaker section in the lower bottom, you have what looks like eyebrows. It's also very much of the machine age, so they very prominently display the aluminum. This was a very expensive shortwave radio, 1938, and American, by the way, the company's called Hallicrafters, and it really gives you a sense how the United States was devoted to Art Deco in that particular year. The same year that radio was made, this one is 1938. It's an Austrian radio. And if you know the streamlined modern style, the Bauhaus style, which you see reflected here in some of the buildings that come a little bit later, 38, 39, and 40, you can see that this radio, again, looks just like that. So the radios actually picked up the same stylistic elements that buildings were at that time. Now, I don't own either of these radios anymore, and I never knew any of this until I became a tour guide. This radio, by the way, this radio was the first radio in my collection. I pulled it out of the garbage when I was 14 years old. And my father said it was a radio repairman, a radio technician. He said, what are you bringing home that piece of garbage for? Okay, and I said, look at that, that's so interesting. You know, the front here, this was all smashed in, this was all rebuilt later on. And over here where the dial is, you see the little dots? Those were lights that lit up, and each light corresponded to the channel of a locality in Europe before World War II. So this was, and because my father was a technician and he taught me how to repair these things, and I was an amateur radio operator, all this stuff worked. Eventually I sold it off. I don't regret that, but can you imagine? After I owned it, I learned a lot about it. Okay. the topic for tonight, Sunny Isles Beach. This is the town I told you about 10 miles north of here. This is a snapshot from the air taken maybe 10 years ago. If you took a picture today, there's another dozen buildings there. Okay, we're going to look at that transition from beachfront sand to what it is today. This is the oldest picture that I've ever seen of this area. One of the interesting things, if you notice what it says Sunny Isles Beach. We tour guides actually use this picture sometimes to describe Miami Beach. Technically speaking though, take a look at what that postcard says. Okay, Miami Beach. This land was purchased in 1918 by Harvey Baker Graves. 1,900 acres. I'll show you a little bit more about that area. Harvey Baker Graves is the kind of personality that we know a lot about even before you know about it. By that I mean he was a man about 65 years old when he came here. He had a vision. He wanted to build a city. Now, if I didn't tell you his name, you'd probably think I'm talking about Carl Fisher. Okay? If I was giving this presentation in Broward County, you would probably think I'm talking about Joe Young, who developed Hollywood. All three of these men in almost adjacent areas, all three of these men at roughly the same age, they took the fortunes that they had a dream, and they said, I want to do something that nobody else did. And that's why I say, you can tell the biographical details, you don't tell the name, you won't know which of these men, and there were probably others, which of these people developed which area, because they all had a dream. They were going to create something out of the wilderness that was unique and different and enjoyable. To give you a sense of what his purchase was, it went to what's today Haulover Cut, all the way over to what today would be Biscayne Boulevard. Biscayne Boulevard doesn't exist in this map. This is a map from the 1920s. And on the where Biscayne Boulevard is, which today would be Aventura or North Miami Beach, went from 135th Street to 172nd, and in Sunny Isles from the Haulover Cut to about 194th Street. 1,900 acres, very little of which today is called Sunny Isles, by the way. Only a small fraction. The only fraction that's called Sunny Isles, actually called Sunny Isles Beach, is the strip along the water. That's the only part that's Sunny Isles, okay? In the original purchase, that's a picture of the bridge being built. Bridge is built 1925, the first bridge. 1 year later, if you've taken our tours, you know about the hurricane of 1926. Well, then it only hit Miami Beach. Look at how well that bridge was built. The bridge survived, but all of the approach road, which was just gravel and sand and a little cement, got washed away. It was rebuilt within a year. This is what the bridge looked like when it was finished. The other picture here, this is what it looks like today. This bridge was taken down 1950. I'm going to show you what replaced it. Here's an aerial view. I don't know the exact year. My guess is 30s or 40s. If you know the area, this is Haulover Park today. Okay, so this would be Haulover Park. Right over here, Collins Avenue will exist at some time in the future. It doesn't exist here now. So for many years, there was this restaurant there. The restaurant was called the Lighthouse Restaurant. Called the Lighthouse Restaurant. I'll tell you a little bit more about it. And this road here, this remnant of the road, that's still there. If you've ever gone up to Haulover Beach, okay, I'm going to show you what it looks like. Here's another picture of that area. This is what it is today, where the restaurant was. Now notice over here, in this older picture, there's no sand, right? There's no beach. There's just a seawall. Over here, you have sand, because all of this sand has been added later. I'm going to show you a little bit about that. If you go to the end of Haulover Park, you have the remains of that bridge. So here's the foundation, and over here, here's some of the metal work that was either part of the seawall or the steel supports. These remains are called riprap, so that's why I'm using the term riprap. Any of the remains from that bridge collectively are called riprap. A picture later on, after the war, 1950, a new bridge is built right over here. This is Collins Avenue, and the bridge here is taken down, and the road becomes a beach path. There was a pier there for many years. It washed away in one of the storms. there was a sport fishing dock, no longer there. Many famous people, when they came to Miami to fish in the 30s, this is where they went. And names that I've seen associated with it are Robert Mitchum, Ernest Hemingway, Humphrey Bogart. This was a very popular area for sport fishing in the 1930s and 40s. These are two views of the modern bridge, the 1950 bridge. And notice, there are two buildings here, the Kenilworth and the Seaview. The Kenilworth, there's a condo by the name of Kenilworth, but it's not the same building. The Seaview is actually the same building. So if you look at this picture and this picture, there's only one building that's still there, the Seaview Hotel. Here's a picture of that beach bed. So you remember the road? So after the war, after 1950, the new bridge is built, Collins Avenue becomes the road, and this is the beach path. Before landfill, sandfill, this is what it looks like today, and beyond it, in the grove, is 200-300 feet of beach fill that's protecting the road and the town as well, and the sand dune was built. You'll notice that in the original picture, there's no sand. Aerial view, as we come out of the park, this is the beginning of Sunny Isles as a town. This is the beginning of it. This is the first island. This is the island that Arlen House is on. And there's a series of other islands. I'll show you some of the buildings. Similar, not exactly, but the similar view today. So just to show you, these are hotels. This island is undeveloped. This is that same island today. That's Arlen House Condo. Okay? Doesn't look anything like this today, by the way, because this picture is the late 1990s. As we go into the future, you're going to see that all of these low-rise buildings, or almost all of them, were knocked down. We have high-rise condos. Heading north. Okay, everybody knows Morris Lavins, right? Mountain Blue, Temple Menorah. Well, actually, he has one building in Sunny Isles. And the building that he has in Sunny Isles is one of the Arlen House condos. And it's not the most distinctive building that he ever built. The interesting feature here, to me, probably one of the interesting features, is that those balconies kind of almost look like wings. They're not there anymore. They knocked them down and redid them. Okay? But what is there is, you see this shape? Okay? I have a name for it. I call it a concrete wave. You notice how it looks like a series of waves? Well, it turns out that's one of his Morris Lavins' features. I noticed this going up Collins Drive. So take a look at these are all Morris Lavins buildings. I've documented this. So notice the entrance, concrete wave. That's my name for it, by the way, concrete wave. Concrete wave. And some more. Concrete wave, concrete wave. And some more. Concrete wave, concrete wave. So this was one of his landmark features, standard features. All of these buildings are roughly from the 60s. So it appears that in the 60s, this is one of the features that he built into buildings. Whether they have that in the rear, I don't know, because I don't have access to the rear of the buildings. Okay? Sunny Isles, oldest structure that existed. So remember what all of these were. These were groves, these were mangroves. A mangrove, if you don't know, is a tree or a bush that is tolerant to salt water, because these islands were often underwater at high tide. When this area became developed, whether you're talking about South Beach or Sunny Isles, it doesn't really matter. When this area became developed, they pulled out the mangroves, they pumped in the sand, they brought up the land so that it would be dry under high tide. In the case of Sunny Isles, they built a few islands, and then they built bridges. These bridges are built out of the oolitic limestone that is under the sand. And a few of these have survived. Not this particular one, but here. This is an actual picture. And this is a double bridge. Collins Avenue would be about over here, and back here are a series of homes. So these are two of the bridges. This is the oldest structure. It dates to the late 1920s, the oldest structure in Sunny Isles. There's a picture of one that hasn't survived. I don't know the exact location. This appears to be a fishing bridge over a lake. The oldest building. This building was built by the founder, Bobby Baker Graves, as his own personal home, 1929. Today, appropriately, it's owned by the mayor. And what is not original, by the way, is this wall. This wall was only put up a couple of years ago. I was at a party, and I had an opportunity to meet the mayor and his wife a couple weeks ago, and I was telling her about this project, and she told me something about this wall and why they put it up. people would see this nice building and they thought it was like a public park and they would walk on. She said she woke up one morning and people were taking wedding photos on the wall. So she said after that, she said, we really want our privacy. And they put up this wall. It's unfortunate because it blocks a view of the building. The only way I got a view, the gate is open, because this is after Storm Sandy and they're cleaning it. So that's the only reason I got an opportunity to take a photo of it at that time. Okay, we've now left the park and we're going north, and we're right at the first condo. It is physically the first condo, and it is chronologically the first condo that was built on the water in Sunny Isles. It's also the only condo that retains the name of the hotel that stood on its grounds. So this is the Tropicana condo, built around 1982. It moved a little bit, I'm sorry about that. It was built in 1982, and there's a very interesting story about this building today. It's next to a building that's under construction, called the Ritz-Carlton, and the owners of this building have an interesting situation. The land that the building is on is worth more than the value of the condominiums. In other words, if you were to find a condominium of the size and quality of that condominium, let's say it would be $700,000 in Sunny Isles. But the builders are willing to pay each owner of that apartment about $1.5 million if they sell them the whole building and let them knock down the building. So a super majority of more than 70% of the people have voted to sell their apartments for about double the market value of what they would normally be. However, there's another clause in their contract, in their documents, and the other clause in their documents is that if 10% object, they can block it. Well, the builders of the building next door have bought up 10.4% of the apartment rights, and they are blocking the sale of this building until their building is finished, so they can sell all these apartments and tell everybody every apartment has a view. And the proximity between these two properties is only, they're borderline next to each other, and the way the building's only 15 or 20 feet from the property line, you will eventually have a situation where windows are looking at windows instead of a beach or the park. So they have blocked the sale. I'm sure once the other building is finished, they'll release it, and they'll release it for sale, and another building will go. The style that most of these buildings were built in is historically coming from the Bauhaus style. Bauhaus was a school that operated in Germany, 1919 to 1933. And while there were other architects that worked in this, not in this style, but worked in modern styles earlier, I think we could give credit to the Bauhaus people for the concept that form follows function. So what that really means here is that the Bauhaus people believe that the beauty of the building comes in the use of its materials and the use of the way the materials are put together, and they weren't really adding any extraneous decoration. We probably have some examples of similar buildings here. And certainly the later buildings, the more modern buildings, the streamlined buildings, start to pick up some of those stylistic elements. This, by the way, the Bauhaus, it says Bauhaus, this was the actual site of their school. Today it's a museum in Germany. Closed down in 1933, by the way, because the Nazis did not like modern architecture. So they closed it down for what they considered to be political reasons. And this is where Tom Wolfe's book gets very interesting, because where did those architects go? They went to England, they went to the United States, and they had a profound influence on the architectural styles here. So if you're interested in the kind of the bigger picture around the country, this would be a good time to look at Tom Wolfe's book. Okay. One particular architect built a lot of these buildings, Norman Giller, and I want to show you a little bit. This is a video that's on the internet, and I want to show you a couple moments of it. Norman Giller is lucky that while he was still alive, his granddaughter collaborated with him on putting a book together about his experiences. And we're also very lucky because we look at the other architects in this area, and very few of them left any kind of documentation. You got to remember, they didn't think they were building structures that were going to last forever. They didn't think they were building beauty. They thought they were putting up buildings that were right for their time, and when their time was over, something else would be put up here. And very few of them thought that they had a legacy that was worth preserving. Norman Giller is lucky enough that he lived long enough into that period of time when people wanted to know more about it, and he had a granddaughter that was interested in collaborating on a book with him. So this is a short portion of the video that his daughter made with him.
My career, very modern. It's just, it's this sort of tropical paradise. And people came to Miami, people lived in Miami to get away from it all and to sort of revel on this celebration. And the architecture that my grandfather did, much like this hotel that we're sitting in, really very much played with that and really sort of embodied that sense of play. You had circles and you had all these sort of kidney shapes and you had these angles and all of these different very playful elements that, you took this sort of core of a very modern, simple building and then added these interesting design elements to really catch your eye.
Ira Giller is Norman Giller's son, who has also worked as an architect in the family business for his entire career. Sarah Giller Nelson is his daughter.
Okay. If you're interested in seeing the rest of it, just Google Ira Norman Giller, and this will come up. This goes on for about 10 minutes. Very interesting, because this is one of the few places where you can get the perspective of the man who really put up the building. Okay, moving up north. We're all the way up to 157th Street, and you start to see a style that became dominant. You see a style here, that becomes dominant. You see these buildings are built perpendicular to the ocean. They have a lot of window space. In the front, you're going to have an asymmetrical public space. So you have this asymmetrical kind of low-rise, 2, 3, 4 stories maybe, overlooking the ocean, overlooking the public area, a lot of light. That's a very, very MIMO concept, Miami modern concept. Let's bring the outside in, let's let the light in. You also have to remember that they were building these in the 1950s, and that's the decade where we got air conditioning. You enter 1950, and very few buildings, except cinemas. Cinemas were the first buildings in a city or theaters in general, that got air conditioning. But as you go, and that was in the 30s, but in the 50s, you start air conditioning in the early 50s. Probably by 1960, most of the buildings had it. So when you're in a period before you have air conditioning, you're going to really want to have some airflow and some light that's natural. And these buildings were really maximizing it. Okay? This is a Norman Giller. Now, here's an interesting story. When the first motel was in California, 1926, St. Louis Obispo, and what is a motel when you think about it? Okay? Abbreviation of the word motor, hotel, of course. And motels were designed as automobiles became popular and the roads got better, people started to travel. So the motel was where you stayed when you were on your way to someplace else. But you wanted to stay in a room that was predictably clean, predictably comfortable, and more than anything else, convenient. So what did you want to do? You want to just pull right into your parking space, go into your room, spend your night there, get up in the morning, and go on. So that was the concept of motels. This motel here is believed to be the first motel that put in 2 stories. Now, why is that so controversial? Well, because the feeling was up until then that people want convenience. They're not going to be willing to climb up a flight of stairs and take their luggage with them when they're only going to be leaving perhaps the next morning at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. So it was a groundbreaking concept to say, you know what? This is oceanfront land. This is too expensive. We got to start building up. Very first 2-story condominium, 2-story motel in the United States. Another concept that was generated in Sunny Isles is the concept of the resort motel. Because what did I tell you about motels a moment ago? A motel is where you went on the way to somewhere else. Well, Sunny Isles got the idea that, you know what? The motel could be your destination. If you provide enough amenities, if you provide it in the right location, then this could be the place that you're traveling to. Now you might say to yourself, well, why would I go to a motel when I can go to a hotel? And it comes down to one thing. It comes down to price. This is not the same market as the Fountain. If you were to ever look at the prices whether you looked at them today or you looked at them 60 years ago, you would see a price differential between a motel in Sunny Isles and a room in the Fontainebleau of probably in the nature, more or less, 3 to 1. So if you had a $20 room in these days, it was a $60 room, I mean a $20 room in 1960, the Fontainebleau would have been $60 at that time. And if you were on a budget, I mean, think about it today. If you have a choice between $150 and $450, that's a big deal. That's a lot of money. So these were built for people, working class people, people on a budget, unionized workers, school teachers, people with small businesses. They wanted to have a vacation. They wanted a quality experience, but they had a limited budget. And that was the market, the resort motel. Another Norman Giller building. I don't know. Oh, you know what? I did a conversion on this. I have to go back. I'm sorry that some of this is cut off. So this is the Fontainebleau. If you remember your literature from the 50s, Fountainhead. The Fountainhead was a famous Ayn Rand novel. And it was about an architect whose vision was interfered with, and rather than let the bureaucrats tell him how to build the building, he blew it up. So it was truly an architect's story. Of course, it was really a social commentary. In any event, this architect must have been a fan of Ayn Rand because he named this hotel after her book. Now, this gives you another idea of how these buildings started to develop. Two rows of rooms, public areas in between. This, of course, is what's there today. Very little, we're going to come to some buildings that are still there, but very little from the 1950s area survives. Most of these buildings were built in the 50s. I'll show you just a couple a little later when we get a little further north that were built in the 60s. And by the way, you want to know where it is? The street number tells you. 161 is 161st Street. So we started around 157th. We're heading up to about 190th. We're at 161st right now. Now, what I want to point out here is a similarity between this style between some of the apartment houses that are built in the North Beach area and the motels that were built in areas like Sunny Isles. Take a look at this building, okay? Conceptually very simple. Now remember, this is not a hotel, this is an apartment house. This particular building, or buildings of this style, were often built by Gilbert Fine. Gilbert Fine started his career in Norman Giller's office. So who influenced who? I'm not at liberty to. A lot of window space, perpendicular to the ocean. But now these apartment buildings, they have a problem. These apartment buildings don't have any public space. They don't have any common area in them. And yet they want to give you some sense of community. So what did this architect do? They put up these panels that connect the buildings. So if you go into the North Beach area, if you go in, you will see Surfside, particularly North Beach, you will see dozens and dozens. And every one of these, by the way, is different. You will never see two that are the same. And there are dozens and dozens of them. Gilbert Fine was the most prolific of the architects, but not the only one. And just to compare for a moment, okay, you can see how similar. This is a very similar concept, but it's brought down into the housing instead of the hotel. Heading up north, the Trent, a very, very MIMO building, the block windows. You notice in Art Deco, we would normally have eyebrows. Here you get into a block window, box window, I should say. Heading north, we now hit 163rd Street. This is the original plan. Oh, by the way, people that are in Sunny Isles, if you go to City Hall, they have a history wall there. And the history wall shows you some things that I'm showing you, and a lot of things that I don't, most of what I'm showing you isn't there, and many of the things that they have, I don't have either. I'm not trying to replicate the history wall. This is the one picture I took from the history wall, because I don't see it anywhere. I actually took a photograph of the history wall. And if you know, this is Collins Avenue. If you read the fine print here, this road that runs along the beach, remember you saw that road earlier when we were in the park? Well, I don't know if you realize it. We're standing on Ocean Drive here. This street used to go all the way up. And when there are only, in Miami Beach, there are only two remnants left. You've got Ocean Drive, then it's discontinuous, then you have Ocean Terrace in the 70s. But in fact, at one time, This was all continuous along the beach. What happened is that in the northern area, north of here, the owners of the buildings, they didn't want to be separated from the ocean with the road. And there's a whole story about how Carl Fisher used to come in at night and rip up the road, and the drivers, the bulldozer drivers, would be arrested. He'd pay their bail, and they'd do it again the next night until he ripped up most of the road. So we only have a couple of sections of it that are left. Same thing happened in Sunny Isles, okay? That road went all the way up to 163rd Street, and then it cut over. The fine print here says current Ocean Road and proposed Ocean Road. The proposed road we know as Collins Avenue. The present Ocean Road no longer exists because the condominiums there have all claimed that land. If you know that area, there's a double bridge. This would be the direction coming east, and over here where the canal is, roughly, would be another bridge heading west. So this canal has been filled in. This is a close-up of that picture. This island here, they're calling it Grand Venice Canal. We don't use that term anymore. I've never heard it used. But you remember that coral bridge I showed you? That's this bridge right here. That's the bridge I showed you earlier. And this community right here, all private homes. The mayor's home I showed you, the mayor's home is right here on the very tip, right over here at this tip. Okay, here's a map view. So we look, here's the road that exists, here's the road that gets built, so one's east and one's west. And there's, this map, it says State Route 140. You do a Google on 140 and they tell you the name of 140 has been changed to A1A. So 140 and A1A are historically the same road. This is the only remnant of that canal. So if you go over to the bridge, where the bridge takes off, right behind here, this would be North Bay Road. So a couple of 100 feet of that canal still exists, but previously it went about another 1,500, 2,000 feet all the way up to what's today Collins Avenue. Eastern Isles, this was part of the purchase, but Eastern Isles is a complete creation. This was just a bunch of mangrove swamps. They pulled it out, they dumped in the sand, and this is a view of it before any of that happened. You move across the street over to Oceania State Park. The plan for Oceania State Park for 20 years was to build a permanent World's Fair called Interround. And the purpose of the World's Fair was to open up South America, and it was going to be a gateway to South America. There's one remnant of it. If you go into the park, there's a street called Interround Boulevard. That's the only, one more remnant of it too. Part of this land is also on the campus of FIU, and one of the FIU buildings was the administration building for Interround during that period of time. So there are actually two traces of it, one building and one street name. This, of course, never got built. This is complete artist conception. 163rd Street. So I showed you that beach road a moment ago. So the beach road is back here, the road that goes out. This building here, Castaways, was the most iconic of all of the hotels. This building was so famous, the Beatles, they played in the Deauville on Ed Sullivan's show, I think 1963. When they were done playing, this is where they came to party. It was built by an architect that we don't hear a lot about, Charles McKiernan. We don't hear about, but one of his buildings was just destroyed on one of the Bay Islands. We don't hear a lot about him. He was very prolific up in the Hollywood area, and also he tragically died in an automobile accident when he was about 43 or 44 years old. So I think at that point where his career was really taking off, and he could have had another 20 years of work, unfortunately he never got to make that contribution. So, and he was an architect that really liked to have fun with the architecture. So he built the original Castaways, is this building here, built in a kind of a Neo-Polynesian style. It was destroyed in 1982, why I'll tell you a little later, okay, and today the Oceania Condo is in its place. And this is where I have to do a little bit of a disclaimer and tell you a little bit of a hypocrite. I talked about preservation, but actually I live over here. I live on the grounds of the Castaways, and I'm getting to enjoy that beach view that everybody else is being deprived of. Okay, a couple more things I want to show you. So if you look here, you can see, if you look very carefully, you can see that there's a seawall. And the seawall makes a 90-degree turn right about over here. Well, we still have that seawall. This is the back of Oceania Condo, and our beach path here, our path along the building, is literally above the seawall. And if you look here, you see these little holes. That's where the poles were, the steel poles were that held up the fence. That would correspond to this area right here. The seawall makes a 90-degree turn. This is where it makes a 90-degree turn. It continues underneath the grass. So you can't see it here because it's a little bit under the grass. Occasionally the grass dies, and you can see some of the cement sticking out. Old days, you had a pool. Today, beach cabanas. Here's that other side. This is actually the original Castaways. Castaways is interesting because it was originally built on the intracoastal side, but the architecture and the feel of the place was so much fun that there was more demand than they had rooms, so they ended up buying beachfront buildings and expanding over. But the most iconic, interesting architecture that they had was really on the intracoastal side. This is what stands there today, also part of Oceania Condo. Oceania Condo, this property is 14 acres, and Oceania Condo, 5 buildings, occupies those same 14 acres today. Exact same footprint. They had no beach, so they created what I call a phony beach or a foul beach. Notice you can't really swim in it, but you had a swimming pool, you had cabanas, and most important of all, you had drink service. So you can come and have your drinks. Today, you have a parking garage and some apartments on that footprint. If the Castaways was the iconic building from that time, the Rec Bar was the iconic location. They had 5 bars, but the Rec Bar was the one that everybody still talks about. And I have to tell you, even though I was coming here, well, actually I didn't come here. I didn't come here until after this was knocked down. But I was of an age where I could have come here. I didn't do spring break in Florida, but if I had, this could have been a place that I had gone to. People that grew up here, friends of mine from New York that went on spring break when they were in college and came down here, they all have stories about the Rec Bar. The Rec Bar was this fun place. If you notice, you've got these porthole windows, okay? Those porthole windows are into the swimming pool. So from the bar, you could look into the swimming pool. For reasons that I'll tell you about in a minute, it went into decay. This is the newscast from that time.
There were 132 resort hotel rooms here, an elegant nightclub upstairs, and the beach's grooviest go-go bar below. They were the jewels of the Castaways Resort in the 50s and 60s. Ooh, not even the waitresses here.
I want to tell you,
Tourism had done in the whole
I'm not going to show you the whole thing.
We lost the Europeans because the Lecker went bankrupt, so the English didn't come anymore. The dollar became very strong, and we lost the Scandinavians.
Interesting story. So you see the woman that was just, her name is Gertie. Second time I did this presentation. First time I did it, it was for the other tour guides. And it was kind of an in-service and a fun day. I gave this presentation, then we walked up to the hotel, I'm going to show you a little later, and we had lunch. The second time I did it at my condo. And the woman that you just saw, she came to the presentation. She was the manager of the hotel. Later on, when they set up a sales center to sell the apartments, she was the general manager of the entire project. And she had heard that I had done a presentation, even though she doesn't live or work there anymore. She came to the presentation and she presented me with the most beautiful plate from the Castaways Hotel, a gold plate with the Castaways in it. Very, very sweet gesture, and I really do appreciate it. Now, anytime you travel, if you want to see the most iconic building in an area, go to a TD Bank. Every TD Bank has a beautiful mural of some important building. In Sunny Isles, the building they show you is the Castaways Hotel. We have one up here on Lincoln Road. okay? And I forgot what building they have in there. But every TD bank has a beautiful, huge mural of something that's very, very important to the local area. Okay, this is actually a picture of the Castaways being built. Again, when people in my condo found out that I was going to present this, a woman came up to me and said, when the builder was throwing out all of their material, I dove into the dumpster and I took it out. And this woman has an archive of more than 100 photos of this project being built. And where I live is this on top of this sand pile right here. Another thing I learned from doing the presentations, an engineer came up to me. Said, you know why they have the sand piled up? I said, well, I guess because they're going to use a lot of sand when they build the building. He said, no, they pile up the sand to compress. They pile it up to compress the sand below it, so that prepares the soil for the piles that are going into it to make the building stable. So one of the pleasures of doing a presentation, this happens on tours too. Sometimes I learn something that I would have had no other way of learning. Okay, everybody, I should say everybody, but many people are familiar with this image. This is an image of a frozen fountain. This particular frozen fountain is 2 blocks from here in the Wolfsonian. And of course, the frozen fountain is an image that came out of the 1925 show in Paris, Exhibition des Arts Décoratifs et Industriels Modernes, and it's from that show that the term Art Deco is eventually derived, but that term itself isn't used until the 1960s. But many of us know that the sign or symbol of Art Deco is the frozen fountain. This condo, we're still in the same condo, the Oceania Condo. The condo took a variation on that style. I call this neo-deco, okay? They're not trying to be Art Deco. They know they're not Art Deco. But they're paying homage to Art Deco. Remember, this is 1992. So what's happening here in 1992? This area is starting to really, really appreciate its revival. People are really starting to come back here. Tony Goldman, other investors are coming in and investing some real serious money. And what they did here is they played with the concept. So instead of having a frozen fountain, which projects out, they have a frozen wave. That's my name for it, that projects in. I think it's extremely clever. 5 buildings, wherever you go, you see this image. I call it the frozen wave. This is the lobby of the building that I live in, and if you've taken some of the tours here, you might say that this looks very, very much like a ship from that period of time. It's got a low ceiling, it's very rich wood, very nice lamp fixtures. I certainly had a feeling I was in a ship. If I didn't know I was in a ship, I could have looked at these posters that are right at the entrance to that area, and there are 3 posters of the Normandy. And we know the Normandy to have been the most Art Deco ship that was ever built. Unfortunately, the Normandy did not have a happy ending. It was a financial failure because it was launched in the 1930s. It was in New York when the war started in Europe. They were not allowed to leave. When France capitulated, the Normandy was seized as enemy property by the U.S. government. This is Pier 88 in Manhattan. There was work on it to convert it to a troop carrier. The work was sloppy, it caught fire, and it capsized, and was eventually scrapped. So this is the Normandy in its last day. It's a very sad ending for a beautiful ship that was never a financial success. Okay, heading forward. So some of you may know that I have done a tour. Jack said I've developed some tours. So one of the tours I do on Art Deco weekend is Movie Lover's Guide to Miami Beach. So in preparing for this, I found myself watching a lot of films that I had never watched before. And one of them, which turned out to be hysterical, by the way, is Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. I have to tell you, I really enjoyed it, but I never would have watched it if not for this project. Well, my wife and I were at home watching it one night, and this scene comes in. And I scream at her, "That's our condo! That's our condo!"
Bakers Haulover, a luxury condo complex in North Miami, where Roger Padactor, head of operations for Miami Dolphins, is apparently committed suicide.
So it is indeed our condo. Oh, and you remember I showed you Gertie before? So after I did this presentation, Bertie came over to me and said, and there's a scene in here, I'm not going to show it to you, but there's a scene in here in an apartment. She said, and they filmed that scene in my apartment. So, you know, there are all these very interesting things you'll find out. Okay, moving forward. We're now at 164th Street, and there's a pier there, okay? The pier was built, let me tell you history. So Mr. Graves developed the property. As soon as the bridge was built, 1930, in the 1930s, we go into the Depression. He never really gets too far. Loses control of all the properties in the mid-30s. Another developer from Milwaukee buys the property, and he says, well, I got to do something to bring people here. So he puts in the first pier. So there's been a series of piers, one got washed away. So we now have this current pier. There are fishing piers, entertainment piers, and restaurants. It has a restaurant on it. This is the oldest public building that was ever built, the first building, I should say, in Sunny Isles. And today, it's next to the pier, and today this condominium, the La Pearl, is there. Moving forward, Newport Hotel. I told you most of the hotels were built in the 50s. 2 of them were built in the 60s. This one and another one I'll show you, about 1965 roughly. And notice the similarity to a building I'm going to show you in a minute. Now, what I want to point out is you got a public area here. Okay, here's the public area. By the way, this lighthouse is gone, but everything else is still there. In fact, my wife and I ate in this hotel last Monday, a week ago, a little over a week ago. So it's still very much there, this hotel. Okay, but notice what you have. You have kind of a low-rise building, then you have this kind of a tower here. I'm going to show you another building that's pretty familiar, and you're going to say, wow, a very similar style. Okay, that's the UN building. Le Corbusier and Niemeyer, 2 famous architects. They designed this building. Now I'm just going to switch back for a moment. Very similar stylistically, about 10 years apart. The UN is the 50s, this is the 1960s, but you can see that there's an obvious imitation of that style. The public areas are low-rise, they're asymmetrical. Of course, in the UN, it's meeting space, it's the reception area. Here is the reception area in the restaurants. And then the business tower. What's the business of a hotel? It's rooms. Business of the UN is offices. Another view of the UN. Okay. Moving north. The first hotel that was built in Sunny Isles was called the Green Heron. Not there anymore. The hotel that I just showed you is on the grounds. That's the Newport Hotel. Is on the grounds of the Green Heron. This hotel was built, the only hotel they built before World War II, 1938, and it was what is called restricted. And restricted was a kind of a semi-polite word for saying no Jews. Now, they didn't have to say no blacks, because that was so understood, you didn't even have to put that on there. In fact, in most of Miami, before World War II, a black person required a permit to be in Miami Beach overnight. And that permit could only be acquired if they got a letter from their employer. So the hotels didn't have to advertise no blacks. It was so well understood. But they got a little worried about Jews because Jews could pass. Okay? And they got nervous about it, so they would use the word restricted. Sometimes they would say select clientele. If they got very bold, they would say Gentiles only. Here's another hotel, the Versailles Hotel, actual brochure. Not in Sunny Isles, but it's indicative of that period. Okay? What do I have the matchstick? What did I do with that? No, I guess not. Okay. I recently purchased, I thought I put it on here. I recently purchased a matchbook, big matchbook, about 3 inches off of eBay. It's for a hotel that's on Ocean Terrace in Broadmoor, the building right on the corner. And it says Gentiles only on the match case. I bought it off of eBay a couple weeks ago. So a lot of these hotels, restricted. So what exactly did that mean? To give you a sense of it, I want to show you a little segment. This is a movie, same period, 1947, Gentleman's Agreement. I know that movies are in history, and I'm not pretending that they're history, but sometimes they open up a window, particularly if it's a movie from that period. Because this movie, 1947, this movie doesn't know about the future. It doesn't know about the civil rights movement. It doesn't know anything that's going to happen. It's very much a movie of its time. And this movie is about a writer who wants to do a story of anti-Semitism. He's a Christian, And he says, you know what, I'm going to pretend to be a Jew, and he turned and see what it's like, and I'm going to write about it. And he found the experience much more emotionally wrenching than he expected. And this is a scene where he tries to check into a hotel. I'm going to show it to you. Now, this happens to be in the north. This was in the Adirondacks, I believe. But it could have happened here if they had made that movie about Miami. And the reason I say that is that before air conditioning, the hotels in all of Miami and all of the South down here, they were open seasonal, roughly December 1st to April 1st. Then they closed because without air conditioning, this is not a pleasant place. And many of the hotel owners owned other hotels up north. In fact, if you know the New York area, you know that there's a hotel, or used to be a hotel in the Catskills called Grossinger's. There was a Grossinger's here, okay? It was the SLS a couple of years ago. I think the building is still here. It's changed hands a number of times. So many of the hotel owners had a northern hotel and a southern hotel. And in fact, if you go back to what Carl Fisher was doing, Carl Fisher developed this area to be the winter resort, and he was developing an area up in the north called Montauk Point to be the Miami Beach of the north, where his wealthy clientele were going to go in the summer. So this is a very old concept that you have a northern hotel and a southern hotel, and I think it's valid to show you the scene of a man, Gregory Peck, trying to check into a hotel.
How do you do, Mr. Green? How do you do? In answer to your question, may I inquire, are you? That is, do you follow the Hebrew religion yourself, or is it that you just want to be sure? I've asked a simple question and I can have a simple answer. You see, we do have a very high-class clientele, and well, naturally. Then you do restrict your guests to Gentiles? Well, I would say that, Mr. Green. In any event, there seems to be some mistake, because we don't have a free room in the entire hotel. But if you'd like, perhaps I could fix you up at the Brewster Hotel down near the station. I'm not staying at the Brewster. Look, I'm Jewish, and you don't take Jews. That's the isn't it? If you don't accept Jews, say so. Don't raise your voice to me, Mr. Green. Speak a little more quietly, please. Do you or don't you? Mr. Green, I'm a very busy man now. If you want me to phone for a cab or room at the Brewster, I'll do so. Otherwise what?
I want you to look at the face of the bellboy after he's done. Keep your eye on this guy's face. Having a good time, isn't it? There's a little bit of hypocrisy in all this, by the way. Gregory Peck lived in La Jolla, and it was restricted, no Jews allowed. And La Jolla didn't open up until the 50s. The University of California wanted to build a university there, and the residents were told you could have a university, or you could have restrictions, but you can't have both because we're not going to be able to staff it with the people we want to staff. So the city decided to give up on restriction because they wanted the development and the prestige of having the University of California there. So they gave up on the restrictions about 10 years before it became a matter of law. Oh, another interesting thing I'll tell you, even though it's not Sunny Isles, do you know the last city in the entire country that had restrictions against Jews and blacks was Bal Harbour? Okay, and it went to the Supreme Court in 1975, and the Supreme Court took a very funny position. They didn't say that it's actually illegal to discriminate in the contract. They simply said that as a matter of public policy, governments won't enforce that contract. So Bal Harbour, and Bal Harbour, for those of you that don't know, is right up the street, just before the park, just before the cutover, just before that bridge I showed you. It's part of the island of Miami Beach. Interesting story. The last city in the entire country to have that policy. Okay, moving up north, I'm going to show you a bunch of buildings before and after. It's going to get to look a lot very similar. Now here's an interesting thing, okay? And I'm going to write the mayor about this, by the way, okay? So this is the Dunes Hotel, and the only portion of it that has been saved are these hieroglyphic panels that were in the lobby, and today, do you know where they hang? Over the entrance to the bathroom in a park. Okay, and the city's got to be able to do better than that. So I'm planning to write them a letter, okay, and ask them to come up with a better location than that. And it's interesting though, it's the only remnant of that hotel that survives. Okay, moving north, some more hotels. Again, you can see that style, the common area, the towers. If you were back here, in the back there, you would have 2 towers, a common area between the swimming pools. All the rooms have an ocean view. They're getting the light, they're getting the air. Okay, moving north, some more of the same. Rascal House. Well, Rascal House is to food what the Castaways was to motels. The Rascal House was the most iconic restaurant to eat in that area for many years. I ate there once. My wife and I, we bought our first apartment here in 2004, and when we closed on it, we went to this restaurant to have lunch. It's a good thing we did it, because next year it was gone. So this was a famous restaurant. It was famous for its cheesecake. My parents retired to Delray Beach in the 80s. They had friends in Aventura. They used to come from Delray Beach to eat at the Rascal House. That's how popular it was. Okay? Very good promoter, a real sense of fun. And that's, you remember what Norman Giller's daughter said? What did she say? These places were all about fun. These places were all about feeling good. So if the motels were a place where you felt good when you played, these restaurants were a place that you felt good when you went to eat. Okay, moving north. You had a few hotels on the other side of Collins Avenue. So everything I've showed you so far that's a hotel was on the ocean side, or a combination like the Castaways that had properties on both sides, but people could access the ocean. You had a few buildings that were on the other side, not many. Most of the buildings on the west side of Collins Avenue, the non-ocean side of Collins Avenue, most of them were tchotchke stores. Everybody know what a tchotchke is? A thing, a towel, a memento. So they were mostly tchotchke stores, restaurants, a few hotels. Okay, we wouldn't be where we are today without beach replenishment. What happened is that over time, our beaches faded away. The sand was lost. 1980, the U.S. government signs a contract to provide beach replenishment for 50 years. So remember, only 12 more years to go. Also, there's a big problem. The world, I know you're not going to believe this, the world is running out of sand. Okay? If you were watching beach replenishment just a couple of years ago, they were pumping it offshore. I always think the sand in the desert is smoother, and it doesn't adhere to other sand, and it doesn't adhere to concrete construction materials. The Chinese are using in 1 year now the amount of sand that was being used in 10 years by the rest of the world. So the world has run out of sand. I was telling this story on one of my tours. I mentioned that Saudi Arabia comes to the United States and to the Bahamas now to buy beach sand. And, the idea of Saudi Arabia having to buy sand is kind of like, Alaska having to buy ice. I mean, it just boggles the imagination. And somebody came up on my tour and said, "You're not going to believe this, Joel. I was flying down here yesterday, and I'm sitting next to a man, and I say, 'What do you do for a living?' He says, 'I'm a sail merchant, a sail broker for Saudi Arabia.'" So he says, "I can't believe I heard the same story in 2 days." So the world is running out of sand. But this is going to give you an idea. I'm going to show you a couple of before and afters. Okay, pretty dramatic stuff. Look at that. That's the barge. These were just big vacuum cleaners. Vacuuming it off the bottom of the bay, and then the ocean, and putting it onto the beach. And there's another view, okay? So you could see that this is quite a dramatic difference. And that contract that I mentioned, we were still active, and we're getting beach replenishment every couple of years. You just walk right out of here, you'll see that limestone wall that you think is separating the pavement from the beach. That's the seawall. So before you had beach replenishment, that's where the ocean could come up to. Okay, moving forward. Now, Sunny Isles. I gotta give the city of Sunny Isles a lot of credit. Sunny Isles had no access points when it was all motels. That is, the beach, the hotels claimed the beaches as private. They wouldn't let people come over their property line. and you didn't have beach access unless you stayed at a hotel or you somehow got over that line. Once you were on the sand, it's questionable whether they could stop you. But the city, when they gave permits to build the high-rises, they require every high-rise to cede a certain amount of land. So this city of about 2 miles has 15 beach access points. It also has bathrooms, and they built several garages. Now, one of the places that I've been giving this lecture to is some of the condominiums. And one of the things I tell people, you know, I mean, let's face it, I live in an oceanfront building, and I would love to have a private beach. But a private beach is very, very bad public policy. It's bad public policy because if you restrict access to the beach for people, then everybody else in the community that doesn't have access to it, everybody else is going to say, well, why do I want to pay for beach replenishment so those millionaires can have a nice beach? And it's very interesting to watch the reactions of people, because first, when I start to talk about public access, for the people that live on the beach, their eyes start to roll. But when I mention that restricted access is bad public policy for everybody, I see heads nodding up and down, and some people I can hear whispering, I never thought of it that way. So, but it's true. This city did an excellent job of providing access. We also have about 1,000 parking spaces, and it's $1.02 an hour to park. It's not an outrageous price. You know, I went up to Boca Raton one day with my wife before we were living here, okay, and I pulled into a parking lot. They took a city, a town parking lot, Boca Raton, not even a private lot. They took $30 from me 10 years ago, and after I paid the money, the woman says to me, oh, I don't know if you'll be able to find a parking space. It's very crowded today. So, you know, that's the policy of some areas. I have to say Sunny Isles has done a really nice job of giving access to people. And remember, who's going to use those parking lots? The island, you know, 3 miles long and 1,000 feet wide. There's nobody in that town who can't walk to the beach unless they're disabled. Okay? So the parking lots are entirely for the benefit of people that don't live in the city. Okay, moving up north. Another thing the city did is they built a public park. So they purchased a couple of the motels, and they built a public park, and they provided free beach chairs for the residents in this area, bathrooms and so on. So this is an actual beachfront park that was at one time a couple of hotels. Okay. Oh, that's on I call it the Mimo style bathroom. I have to give them another piece of credit, okay? Instead of, they're putting up nice looking buildings. I think they're nice. I mean, again, you look at that, I call it Mimo style. It's not really Mimo, but it certainly is from that style. And it's attractive, and the colors are nice. And again, what is Mimo all about? What did Norman Giller's daughter say? It's about feeling good. Okay, moving north, a Walgreens, the Monaco. If you've been up there, this is the biggest question mark. I don't get this. Another property owned by a developer by the name of Deezer. When it was open, it was a dump. I mean, it was really a dump. You used to read the reviews on TripAdvisor, and people would say, I needed a room by the beach. I figured out how bad could it be. When I saw the cockroaches on the ceiling, I realized how bad it could be, and I checked out. It was a disgusting place. There was an explosion in a condo next door. Some of the concrete fell down into this building, so this building is closed, but there's no sign of development. I just don't get it. It was a dump when it was open. It's a bigger dump when it's closed. This is a $200 million property, and it's sitting there vacant with no use at all. Okay, so how did Sunny Isles get to be developed? I'm kind of going chronological. Well, we know, if you've taken any tours here, if you know the history, you know that before World War II, most people that were coming to Florida, if they were on a limited budget, they were coming down here to the South Beach area. We had a lot of hotels, particularly the 3-story hotels, that were being built for working class people, people that were unionized. I once did a calculation that an industrial worker was likely to have made about $2,000 a year, and it cost about $150 to spend a week here. So about a 1-week vacation was about 1 month's pay for a unionized worker in the 1930s. And how did people come in those days? They came by train, primarily by train. The train came into Miami. You then had a trolley that went across the causeway, and it went right up Collins Avenue. So many people were coming here by public transportation, and while there were cars on the street, yeah, way less crowded than it is today. I mean, there were certainly some people with cars, but it wasn't the predominant mode of transportation. After the war, everything changes, and it changes for a couple of reasons. This is one.
Viva USA in your Chevrolet, America that's been beautiful. Drive your Chevrolet through the...
If you're my age, and you grew up in New York City, you know this, not New York City, in the United States, you know that too, because it was on television all the time. The other reason the interstate highway system was built, Eisenhower was the supreme commander of the Allied forces in World War II. The Allies conquered Germany, and the Germans had built a road system called the Autobahn. I'm sure everybody's heard about it. It wasn't built to take tourists up to Bavaria on the weekend. It was built to move military material and people, soldiers, from one part of the country to the other. Eisenhower was very, very impressed. He had led a convoy in the 1920s from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, proving that it was possible to go cross-country by road at that time. It was the first time a military convoy had gone. So he was very interested in the road technology. He becomes president in '52, and notice what the interstate system is called: the National System of Interstate and Defense Highways. Because if you want to get something built in the United States, you put the word defense in it, and the budget is unlimited. So the interstate got built, but it is really built primarily or initially as a military road that they let the rest of us use on off days. Okay, moving north. More hotels, more condos that replaced it. Okay, here's an interesting one. So this is actually the same building. You see this building here, nondescript? I guess it wasn't. It didn't have a catch. You know, these buildings, there were so many of them. There were about 40 of these hotels, motels. So they needed an angle. So they renamed it the Hawaiian Isle, and they put a pyramid in it. And I'm not sure why. Some people say maybe it's a mountain, but that doesn't look like a mountain to me. It looks like a pyramid. But the name of the hotel, same building, the Hawaiian Island. Moving north. Now look at the gimmick on this one. You see the elephant? Everybody see the elephant? There's a little boy on it, and his father is taking a picture. So, you know, every building is trying to do something to draw people in. Pan American, now the Aquilina Resort. This was the other building, and this is according to Seth Branson's book. This was also a restricted hotel. Most of these buildings were not restricted. Of course, restricted becomes illegal with the Civil Rights Movement in around 1964, but until that period of time, there was no law. You could determine, actually, Miami Beach passed a law, I believe in the late 40s, that said you could no longer advertise that you were restricted. It didn't actually mean you couldn't have that policy. You simply couldn't advertise. But this area wasn't part of what we call Miami Beach City, and they probably had no such law. Whoa! So what happened? This area goes into a decline in the 1970s. It rose around 1950 because people wanted to come by cars, and it started to go into decline in the 1970s, and the reason is the 747.
I'm Diane. I've got 747s to Miami. Fly me. I'm Terry. I've got great connections in Miami, all over the sunshine states of America. Fly me. I'm Marisa. I've got non-stop flights to Miami every day. Fly me.
Does anybody remember that commercial?
Yes.
Very controversial, if you know what she's really saying. And when this airline ran this commercial, they got a bump of 40% in their traffic, but it didn't last for long. The reality is, we had no beaches, the hotels were considered obsolete, and more than anything else, with the 747, the cost of airfare went down 50% per passenger mile. It was now just as expensive to go to the Bahamas or the Caribbean, get a nice new modern hotel in what in those days was a low-cost area, for what you would be spending for a 20-year-old hotel down here. So Sunny Isles goes into a decline, starts in the 1970s. By 1980, this area is at its low point, full of drug addicts and low-rise slums. Okay, moving north. This is a shame. This was a very, very nice building. It was knocked down about a month ago. And these two buildings here. So this area here refers to this area here. So this hasn't been built yet. These two buildings are here, and just 1 month ago this got knocked down. Very attractive. It had these little cabana right on the ocean. Moving north. Okay, again, you see the common area. If you were back here, you'd see 2 rows of rooms. Trump, a lot of buildings called Trump in Sunny Isles. 5 different buildings. As you probably know, or you don't know, Trump doesn't own any of them. He rents his name. He is a brand. He is not actually a hotel operator for almost all of the buildings. So there were 5 Trump buildings, and they all rent his name. The Bonnet. You remember Charles Kirahan? I mentioned Charles Kirahan at the Castaways. Okay, this was one of his signature. It's kind of a ladder to nowhere, or I should say I don't know what you call it, a road, not a road to nowhere, a path to nowhere. I just want to show you a couple more buildings. Okay, so this one was in Bay Harbor. I believe it was knocked down a couple of weeks ago, right? Okay, this one was in Sunny Isles, and this one I think is still existing. This is in Fort Lauderdale. So these are all Charles Kirahan, same architect, the man that I told you that unfortunately died when he was only 44 years old. Moving on. Now we get into something that's very interesting. So Suez, okay, same style, okay. This this hotel or motel was the site of the first slasher film. Everybody know what a slasher film is? It's a bloody film where they cut people up. The very first one was shot here. I've read that the people were staying at the hotel at the time, and I read that they actually were watching the film. But what's really interesting is there are 3 buildings in a row that still exist, and this is one of them. So this building is still there. Excuse me, that building is gone. This building is there. The Bluegrass. Okay, this building is still here. This one is still here, the Sahara. If you've driven up there, you know the camels. Some people think it's coming down. It's not coming down now. I don't know about the future. It had some damage in the last storm that we had, and they're doing some work on it. But they are doing the work. I've confirmed it. I've spoken to the owners, and they said they're going to complete the work and it's going to reopen. Today, this building, by the way, is a condominium. It's a condominium cabana club, basically. Okay, and the owners own each room, and they can also choose to rent them out. It's next to the Thunderbird Hotel, and the Thunderbird Hotel will rent them out. So this building is still there. Those camels are still there as well. And then finally, you have the Thunderbird. The only thing that's different is that this emblem is no longer on there, because when the Deezer family bought this building, they tend to knock it down, so they didn't buy the Thunderbird rights. But notice again the style of the building. It's a low-rise, a common area, and then there's a tower behind it. It's hidden, but you can see it here. They actually tried to hide the tower, but it's about a 6-story tower. It's right back here. Still there, okay? And I have to tell you, go there, look around, and eat. Because one day you're going to wake up. When you walk into this building, you are walking into the 1950s. It's not entirely original, but it's very original. It has a restaurant in there called the Montreal Grill, reasonably priced. They don't pay me a commission, by the way. Okay, I'm telling you to go there because you're going to be able to step into the 50s, and one day you're going to open up the newspaper and you're going to find out that it's been slated for destruction. There was no protected status on this building. Okay, it was sometimes called a 4-man's Fontainebleau. If you know the Fontainebleau, you know you enter it. It has this very, very dramatic staircase. On a somewhat smaller scale, they replicated that here. So it's a really nice. This is not what the lobby looks like today, but structurally it's the same. They've changed the light fixture and some other things as well. But structurally, it's got the staircase and everything is still open. My wife and I, there's a Thunderbird, Thunderbird was a chain, so there's a Thunderbird on Treasure Island on the West Coast. And we were on Treasure Island visiting some friends about a month ago, and we saw the Thunderbird. And beautiful on the outside, the Thunderbird is all lit up. I should probably include that in this presentation. We went inside, the lobby was completely chopped up into nothing. Okay, the registration area was about 20 feet by 20 feet, and the rest of the lobby area was chopped up into restaurants and beauty parlor and everything else. An absolute complete loss. But this building has an originally shaped interior, even if the light fixtures and some other things are different. Movie, The Hole in the Head. Does anybody know that film? A very interesting film. If you think of film, remember what I told you, I do a tour sometimes called Movie Lover's Guide, Accidental Witness to History. So this movie is about a hotel. It's the Cardozo Hotel today on 13th Street. It's about a hotel that's not successful, and the owner wants to buy up all of South Beach, knock it down, and put up Disneyland. But the movie opens, it doesn't open in South Beach, it opens in Sunny Isles. And the reason it opens in Sunny Isles, because in 1960, when this film was made, Sunny Isles was the place to be. And he's giving you a contrast between where he is, enjoying himself, and where he works, which is at an unsuccessful and failed. Bluegrass, I showed it to you. Sahara.
If anyone thinks I'm a well-heeled fish out on the spree, they got a hole in there.
So, again, what did I tell you? It's not a documentary, but look, it shows you something. You can't find that picture anywhere else. Okay, moving forward. Oh, the Cardozo Hotel. So this is from the same film. They renamed it the Garden of Eden, okay? If you watch the film, you see there was a mural in there. It's long gone. I mean, the whole hotel has been rebuilt. You want to see beautiful views of that mural? They're in this film. Okay, that's the terrace. Garden of Eden, that's across the street, so they're sitting on the seawall over here. Okay, moving forward. This has got to be the ugliest building in Sunny Isles, okay? It's the Porsche, call it the Porsche Center, and I suppose it's supposed to look like an automobile cylinder, okay? And then it's got, these would be like the cylinder rings, if you know what goes around a cylinder. And then you have some rods over here that look kind of like the push rods that push a cylinder, but it's an ugly, ugly building. It has a big wall that separates you on the street. There's nothing about it that I like it. It's fitting to claim, by the way, is that when you drive in, if you're an owner, the elevator, you drive your car into the elevator, and while you're sitting in your car, the elevator takes you up to your apartment. When you get to your floor, it parks you in front of your apartment, and then you can get out of your apartment. So you don't have to be bothered taking an elevator from the garage. It takes you right up. They also call it the billionaire's room, because these apartments, needless to say, are quite expensive. Moving up north. Again, similar design, new buildings. Similar designs, new buildings. A little different design, okay, now a construction site, soon to be new building. Similar style, new building. Now here's an interesting thing. This is an advertisement for 1964. What does it say? Miami Beach. Now let's look at the names of the hotels. Okay, Taché, Hallandale. Colonial Inn, Sunny Isles. Desert Inn, Sunny Isles. Diplomat, Hallandale. Diplomat, Hallandale. Golden Nugget, Sunny Isles. Seabreeze, Sunny Isles. Sunny Isles, Sunny Isles. Waikiki. I'm not showing you every hotel, by the way. I'm just showing you a lot of them. So, this advertisement, notice that the word Sunny Isles doesn't appear anywhere in it. Why? Because even when this area was in decline, where did people want to go? What had the image of the glamour? What did people know? They knew Miami Beach. So even when you weren't in Miami Beach, you advertised that you were. Okay, moving north. Well, this is familiar to you now. 2 days of hotel rooms, a common area. And what do you have there? Not surprising. New building. New building. New building. Now here's a funny one. Blue mist. So, okay, and it has these mists of the maids. Maids of the mist. Anybody know what that is? Anybody guess? I'll tell you what my guess is. And this is, by the way, it's just a guess. You go to Niagara Falls, the ship that goes underneath it, look at the name, Name of the Vixen. Now, you might say, well, what's the connection between Niagara Falls? It's the same class of clientele. My parents were the kind of people that didn't vacation here, but they could have. Their honeymoon was in Niagara Falls. So it was the working class people that were going to Niagara Falls. It was the working class people that were coming here. And what was the hotel trying to do? It was trying to do something that sounded familiar, something that maybe that you would have done before. That's my theory, okay? I'm sticking to that story, unless somebody else has a better one. Okay, another thing to look at, how much did these hotels cost? Well, off-season, they could be as little as about $5 a day, $2.50 a person. Peak season, they were about $20 a day. You adjust that for inflation, it's about $140 a day today. So here is the Thunderbird, right? The hotel I said you all should go to and eat at, look at, walk around. Look what a room costs now. This would have been last December, $130. So basically, you adjust for inflation. This hotel, and by the way, it's a nice hotel. I would stay there if I were coming here, if I didn't live here. Nice pools right on the beach. You know, not bad for $130. You know, I travel and I stay at a roadside Marriott Courtyard. I pay more than that, and I'm only looking at the interest rate. Okay, moving on. The other hotel that's left. Okay, also about mid-1960s. Still functioning as a hotel. It's changed its appearance a little bit, and it's a condotel. And what a condotel means is that each room is owned by individual investors. So it's not owned by a corporation or a single individual, and then that individual, depending on that contract, has the right to perhaps rent the room out. I should say has the right to stay in the room no more than 30 days. In most cases, and I've been told that by somebody who owns an apartment here, except for about 10 of the rooms, you cannot stay in those rooms more than 30 days a year. The other 330 days, it has to be available for the rental market. And the reason I know this is that I know somebody who bought one of the 10 rooms that has no restrictions, and he's lived to regret it. And the reason he lived to regret it is at first he thought he was getting this really good deal. He was getting all the oceanfront facilities, and I think he paid like $40,000 or $50,000. And then came the assessment. They needed to fix up the hotel, and when you have a hotel, every room has to look the same. You have to pay for the lobby. He said, well, I don't use the lobby. They said, we don't care. He paid $50,000 for the apartment, and they just gave him a $50,000 assessment. So he's not happy about it. And he tried to sell, and so did everybody else, the other 10 people. So he can't even sell it for what he paid for, because the assessment is more or equal to the value of the apartment. So now he's stuck with it, and he's going to have to pay that assessment. Okay, moving north. Another building and another new building. Okay, now, the history of the city itself. Sunny Isles was unincorporated Miami-Dade County until 1997. And until 1997, all these low-rise buildings were, almost all these low-rise buildings were here, 90% of them. Okay, it was still the low-rise condos. And developers saw an opportunity. They said, this is zoned pretty low. Why don't we incorporate it as a city, get the zoning changed, the beach in Golden Beach, and the police came up to him and said, you have to leave or we're going to arrest you. He said, this is public beach. He said, well, if you want to test it, you got to get arrested to prove it. Okay? Probably would be thrown out of court, but because they didn't put that sand there, the government did. They can't possibly claim they own sand that they didn't put there, but they're claiming this is a private and no beach access points at all in the entire city. I don't know how they get away with it. It's bad public policy, and it's stupid in the long run. If I had a choice, I'd say don't give them any beach replenishment. They don't deserve it. They're making no effort. Worse, making no effort. They do everything they can to keep people off their beach. Okay. This is another picture of what it looked like before there were any buildings. The other thing that's happening is when this was built, this was not expensive land. Okay? You know what an oceanfront lot cost in the 1950s? $25,000. Okay? And the houses that were built on it were pretty modest. They're all being knocked down, and mega mansions are going up. Okay, that's kind of the end of the presentation. I do want to tell you, if you're interested, here are two interesting books. One of them is by Seth Branson, Sandbar and Sophistication, and this is actual history. Some material that I showed you, a lot different, okay? I actually had the opportunity to have breakfast with Seth yesterday, and he was gracious enough to look at my presentation. And he's going to ask me to do it for some historical associations that he's affiliated with. He thought it was very interesting and very different than his book. Okay, so one might think of these as complementing each other. The other book is, remember I told you Norman Giller and his granddaughter wrote a book. This is the other book, Designing the Good Life. Okay, what's the difference between the good books? The two books. This is a history of a town. This is really a history of architecture. Okay, a lot of that architecture was Sunny Isles, but it's architecture, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm simply saying that these two books have a different focus. Each focus is interesting and useful, but they're very different. You know all about this. I do this in condos and other places, so I always put in a plug for Miami Design Preservation League and doing our tours. That's why I'm looking at this picture. Okay, our lecture series. What a coincidence. Okay, and finally, one more thing I'm going to show you. I don't know if you noticed what the source of a lot of my information was. Postcards. So the way I got into this is I started buying postcards. I actually went one morning, I was on my bicycle. I was over at Lincoln Road where they had that antique mall on the weekend, and I went up to a guy who had a lot of postcards from Sunny Isles. I think I bought 11 of them for $21. Okay, and I was hooked. Now you got to remember, I was a guy that used to have 800 radios. Okay, so I don't have the 800 radios anymore. Somebody asked me, what do you collect today? I say, I collect information. Okay, but I also managed to collect. I went on a website called Hip Postcard, which is the eBay of postcards, and I went on that website and I bought about another 50 or 60 postcards. So a lot of what you're looking at was postcard history, and that's a very, very lucky history to have. Sunny Isles, MDPL, has a postcard archive of South Beach, and I believe we have about 1,000 postcards on that archive. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, about 1,000, and it's online. You can see all of these pictures online. They don't have, and I'm probably going to donate at some point my collection when we're ready to digitize it, so that I want it preserved. It's more important that it be preserved than I have access to it. Because, you know, I'm 65 years old. You know, how many years ago I had access to it. It's much more important to get it into posterity. What you're looking at is a poster that I made up of some of my postcards, and it tells the story. Starting at the beginning, here's the pier. Now, Castaways, this should be familiar to you. Some of the hotels, a couple of brochures. Here's the Rascal House, the Thunderbird, and a couple more hotels. So this is a poster I made up, and I put up in our apartments. Also we have a club, and it's also in our club. And that's it for today. Thank you.